All right, so in this particular house, again, this is one of the markets where we buy a lot of properties. And a lot of these homes were built back in 2006, 2007, before the crash. So there's a lot of cheap, construction, if you'll say. And a lot of times, too, what the builders did, and I don't know why, is they allowed trees really close to the house. So if you see that one right there, there's one right up here. When we first bought this house, that branch from this tree right here was on the house. And if you actually walk further up there, they had a bunch of branches from this tree actually hitting the roof, which is what was causing small leaks. So the first thing we did when we purchased the property is we wanted to make sure that we protected the roof so it wouldn't leak in the house and damage the work. So what we also did is we had a professional guy come in and trim certain limbs from the trees, but still blending it as much as we could, so that way it wouldn't affect the house, it wouldn't affect the roof, and we can continue our paint job. A lot of times, I know that right now, if you can see, the grass is kind of high. The way that we look at it is, as we're getting closer to the ending stages of our rehab, that's when we invest the money in actually getting it mowed, because there's no point in starting a rehab on a house that's already kind of messed up as it is. We're not marketing it, we're not selling it, so we're just kind of throwing dollars away by just mowing the lawn, because we're going to have to do it again. So what we prefer to do is, unless if it's extremely high, which in that case, then of course we do it just to protect our staff that are out here working. But in this case, it's not that high, we just leave it here. When we're about a week or so before we actually start marketing the property, then we do a fresh mow, we finish some of the landscaping, and of course move on to the marketing stages. But as of right now, it's still a little rough, but you can kind of see the neutral colors that we go with on the paint with the light trim. That is a very popular color scheme, and it's one of the reasons why we use it so often, because that's the best feedback. So we kind of spec our deals out in order to minimize costs, increase our profit margins, and be as effective as we possibly can be.
When you're first pulling up to a property, Rick, and you look at it from the outside, now of course this has already had some work done to it, what are some of the first things that trigger your decisions on what's going to need to be done and whether or not it's worth your while to do it?
It's a good question. Normally, because we've done so many rehabs in our model, we already have a ballpark idea of what it's going to take to do a house. So pretty much when I walk into a house, I look for curb appeal. Now, at this point, I'll be honest and I'll confess, I probably only see 1 out of 100 homes physically, but the team is trained basically to come out and look at the properties. One of the things we look for is, does the property have curb appeal? If the property has curb appeal, then obviously that is something that we look at and we give it a little higher grade. Not every house is going to always look good. There's houses we buy that are older, so of course they're usually not as pretty. What we look for is, can we do enough landscaping to really make that property pop? And the answer is, in most cases, yes. So when we look at a house from the exterior standpoint, we're looking at the structure of the house to see if there's anything that we might see that actually it could be expensive. We look at the electrical, because if the house is not updated with the electric, then a lot of times that's something we're going to have to repair in our numbers. And that can range anywhere from upgrading a box might be about $1,000, depending on the house. But redoing the electrical, we just did that on another house. That's $4,500 right there. So if you're going to make that investment, you need to make sure you know those numbers before you buy. So those are the elements we look for. We look at the roof. The fact that this house was a newer house, but it was still leaking, the reason why we even looked at that is because we saw trees hanging on the roof. So chances are that's going to cause a leak. Otherwise, a house that's this new wouldn't normally have any leak issues. But we already knew that coming in, that was going to be an issue. As far as the exterior, again, we look at the windows. The condition of the windows. Has the house been broken into? Does it have cracked windows? Are those types that we're going to rehab? So those are all the elements that we look at in a house in order to kind of have an idea of what it's going to cost. We already know paint. We know what that's going to cost on every house, just about based on the square footage. We know the color scheme, so we a lot of times take paint from one job, bring it to the next one, so that minimizes our cost and it increases our profit margins. The exterior light fixtures and the interior light fixtures, a lot of times we buy in bulk, so we take those light fixtures, like in this case, I would say that 90% of the lights here that we installed on the inside and out, were already from other projects. So again, we're cutting costs by having our bulk acquisition of products.
You say you bought multiple properties in this type of area, so what is it about areas or specific areas where you'll buy several properties at a time or throughout the course of a quarter, as you say? Mm-hmm. What is it that appeals to you about that specific neighborhood that makes you do that?
I look at activity. I look at average rents, because no matter what, if I'm looking to buy a house to sell it, I'm always looking at it from the perspective of worst case scenario. If I have to lease this property, am I still generating enough of a return for myself and for my investors? So this is an area where I feel comfortable with the pricing, not only for a flip, but also because if something were to go wrong, God forbid, we can lease the property or we can sell it with seller financing or some sort of creative way to generate a profit. So that's one of the reasons why when I pick a market, I look at the activity, I look at the affordability index, and most importantly, as an investor, I want to master certain markets. That's the reason why I'm not everywhere. I'm in specific markets because then my staff can look at a house and they already know what it's worth. They already know what it's going to cost on average to repair the properties. And we're able to exit these properties quickly because we have that system in place. This just so happens to be one of our markets that we're very comfortable with. We understand the numbers. In fact, in some of the properties, we even know what the builder model name is because we already know that we've sold so many of them.